The Mirror Man Stories. Chapter 1. First Reflection. Fear hung in the air of Ashgrove City. It started with a few inexplicable disappearances of individuals who simply evaporated. All that connected those incidents was a whisper about one man, known as a Mirror Man, who never revealed his face. Sarah was the first person to meet him. She stayed alone in her tiny and cluttered apartment, which had old family photos on walls and mirrors. Mirrors were something she adored ever since. She believed they made her small space look larger and brought comfort to her. Then, one evening, while reading under the dim light provided by one lampshade, Sarah noticed in one of her mirrors an unusual reflection. It had begun as a mere flicker or shadow going across the glass. Her mind dismissed it as just an imagination, but then she looked closely and saw him. He was tall and standing behind her, clad in a mask made from shiny silver that reflected back at her terrified face. Then it dawned on her that she was not alone anymore. It was too late. The silence moved with the Mirror Man like an abyss, swallowing all matter present around him. He never talked nor even made any sound. Instead, he raised up a handful of gloved fingers pointing towards Sarah's image appearing within the mirror. She could not move, let alone scream for help, because quicksand seemed to have engulfed all her limbs by then. He bent forward until his mask almost touched the back of Sarah's head. Yet he still appeared across the room, inside the mirror itself. His cold, metallic breath washed over Sarah's neck skin like a gently breeze would, if it could flutter down there somewhere close by one's earlobes at such point in time. Slowly, deliberately, he began twisting his head sideways, as if mulling over how best to dispatch her. Then, without warning or haste, he plunged through the looking-glass. His hand didn't shatter its surface but seemed to melt into it, dragging her reflection with him in. Her body still stood frozen solidly in the real world, but the mirror image screamed. Eyes bulged with fear, lips contorted into a silent plea for help. The sound from her soul reverberated through her mind and not within the room. The Mirror Man dragged her reflection into the world behind the mirror, leaving only an empty, lifeless shell. Sarah's body was found by law enforcement officers, dead on arrival. She had wide-open eyeballs, which were staring at a mirror that depicted nothing more than an empty room. Chapter 2. The Gallery of Lost Souls. Each silent trophy in the gloomy gallery of reflections grew the collection of Mirror Man. Mark, his latest victim, was an artist who spent most of his days sketching in the local park. He obsessed with capturing people at their most vulnerable state. When Mark was packing up his sketchbook in one evening, he noticed a man standing at the edge of a park looking at him. He wore a mask that shone in the dimness. It reflected whatever lay around it. Mark felt uneasy and quickly walked home, but he still had the feeling that someone was watching him. One evening, while working on a new drawing, he took a look at himself in the mirror opposite to his desk. The masked man stood behind him, recording every detail of fear on Mark's face. When Mark turned around, however, there was no one there, only distorted reflection within glass confines. The glass refused to break despite all efforts by desperate Mark to smash it open out of panic. Instead, Mirror Man reached from out its reflective surface, seizing Mark by wrist. This contact was ice cold, as if chilling Mark into his bones and beyond them too. Attempting to withdraw became futile due to tight hold dragging towards mirror instead. Mark spied malevolent glee amid masked man's movement, even though he couldn't discern what expression lay beneath that tilt-upon head. With sudden jerk of hand, someone else appeared before Mark slouched over drawing board dead living reflection placed inside mirror. In this world behind mirrors, some others like him were trapped among those who never stopped screaming silently for eternity a long time back. Stepping backwards, Mirror Man observed that lastest entry into his collection, then disappeared into darkness, having left undisturbed room safe for shattered artist lying on the floor. Part 3. The Silent Witness. Emily was a photographer who was famous for capturing the profoundness of the banal. Each one of those photos framed by her apartment captured one instance in time. She always liked reflections because of how they are capable of distorting reality. Nonetheless, she never believed that reflections could be an entrance to horrors. One day, while developing some photos in her darkroom, Emily noticed something unusual in one of them. It was a picture of an old deserted house, and in the window she saw a face, her own but distorted like as it had been reflected in a twisted mirror. When she took the photo, she couldn't remember seeing herself reflected anywhere, and this made her spine tingle. That night, as Emily went through the rest of her photographs, including another shot where there is another weird reflection again. This time it is on the pane of a shop window. Another reflection can be found on water collected on street surface during rainfalls. It appeared to follow her. The next morning when she woke up, all mirrors were covered with frosty dew, layering them over as they reflected cold air within the room despite summer heat outdoors. Fear gripped her heart tight as she realized that it was no longer just another reflection appearing in her photos, but now inside here at home. From out of the biggest mirror came this figure that took away all warmth from around him, causing Emily to go freeze instantly, dropping down her camera with shaking hands to helplessly look into his scary-looking mask, which also showed back her expression, full of terror, only somehow changed grotesquely. Emily tried fleeing away, but then it felt like moving through molasses, since atmosphere solidified around, making walking become more difficult, every moment passing by slowly and steadily, like somebody doing so underwater due to its relatively high density among other physical properties existing at atmospheric conditions, unlike at normal temperature, pressure environment taking place upon Earth's surface boundary layer, where such events occur frequently enough due to changes seasonal variations. Occurring throughout years so often during certain periods one can notice transformation time, causing things otherwise move very sluggishly, indeed, if ever moving at all, shakes anyone's imagination whenever he sees this. Emily took out her camera and shot a picture of the Mirror Man. He disappeared when the flash went off and she saw again. But the mirror stayed frosted, with her own reflection gone, leaving only everything else that was in the room. Days later, Emily's lifeless body was found freezing cold on the floor with a destroyed camera lying beside her. Everything among those photos she had taken were empty, exempt for one showing an image of a smiling face, reflected in its slightly twisted smile. Chapter 4. The Endless Loop. At the old, collapsing St. Mary's Hospital, Jack worked as a night watchman. It was meant to be pulled down, but he had to ensure nobody entered it till then. They were whispers of ghosts and supernatural sounds Jack had heard before. However, he didn't believe in such things until he met the Mirror Man. On his patrols, Jack noted that the mirrors in the building never seemed dusty, even though they were old and cracked. They reflected their decrepit condition with uncanny precision. One time, while passing by an old operating room at night, something caught his eye from a mirror, a figure other than him. This person was tall and had on a shiny silver mask. Turning around quickly, there was no one behind him. He felt uncomfortable but continued walking through the building, still feeling watched after. Some time passed by. Every time he moved past one of those reflecting surfaces, the figure grew less distant. He decided to face it head on, and went into one of the patient's rooms, where there was a big full-size mirror, in order to wait for it, while looking at himself in it. For a moment nothing happened until Mirror Man appeared from out of nowhere behind him, making the tiny room feel choky with darkness. Jack sought to move only for his body not to respond anymore. Masked Man approached closer until its mirrored surface projected back Jack's own face, except his reflection screamed itself hoarse with fear. The image disappeared afterwards, since Mirrored Man summoned forth its image, inside which Jack found himself being trapped forevermore, as if witnessing his death over again indefinitely throughout eternity. And then he stepped into it, leaving an empty room with distant footfalls that went on echoing long afterwards upon the floor's hollow woodworks. They found him dead next day, lying beside this large mirror when they arrived at workplace early morning before others came over. The hospital closed off, yet remained open for business as far as Mirrored Man was concerned, who lay in wait for the next person to enter the old forsaken structure. Chapter 5. The Final Reflection. The reign of terror of the Mirror Man was approaching its final hour, though he didn't know it. That night he would come for his latest victim, Lily, a young woman who had a passion for occultism. She had heard the rumors and read about the disappearances, and unlike most people she knew, however, she couldn't have been any less afraid. Instead, she grew inquisitive. For many years now, Lily had researched mirrors and their connections with the world of spirits. She considered them as gateways of portals into different dimensions. Therefore, when she learned about the Mirror Man, she went on a hunt to get him, assuming that she could ensnare him. She filled her apartment with mirrors of all kinds, which encompassed her in reflections from every direction. At nightfall thereafter, Lily would sit at its center praying to Mirror Man until he responded back to her call. When darkness suddenly fell over the place and lights dimmed as well as mirrors become frosted, over then one could tell that something has changed in the room. Finally appearing on largest mirror is the Mirror Man, having his mask glinting with light of its own, even while taking one step forward after another. But still Lily didn't move an inch, waiting for that moment. She arranged her mirrors in such a way so that it creates a trap that will use his own powers against him. The Mirror Man came forward, and she began her chant in a low voice. Shimmering like water, the mirrors quivered. Pause for the Mirror Man. He sensed the trap, but it was too late. As though they were made of water, the mirrors around him cracked. Every exit seemed to be blocked by yet another mirror, with his masked face reflected in each one. Lily looked on as the biggest mirror swallowed up the Mirror Man, who twisted and distorted until all that remained was his mask floating on its mirrored surface. She strolled towards the reflection of herself on it and stared at it, making her breath fog up against its glass. Then she broke that thing into pieces, which fell down heavily to the floor, sounding like faraway thunder. As soon as Lily thought she had shattered the mask and trapped the Mirror Man between worlds forevermore in a void of nothingness, or so she thought, a small piece of mirror lay unbroken on the ground, and she walked away. Lily caught a glimpse of her own reflection there. Her face wasn't smiling, but her image was grinning back at her. In fact, he hadn't been trapped. He now lived inside someone else. The story ends with Lily looking at herself having a smile that is not real. The Mirror Man has found a way to continue causing terror without needing mirrors. The story ends with Lily looking at herself having a smile that is not real. The Mirror Man has found another way to continue causing terror without needing mirrors.